I'm David Walker, 41 years old, owner of a small but steady construction supply business in Dallas. I've spent the last 20 years building something from nothing. Long hours in the Texas heat, chasing late payments, negotiating with contractors who just as soon stiff you as shake your hand. That business has scars like me, but it stands on its own legs now, and so do I. Which is why I can pinpoint the exact moment my marriage started to tilt sideways. When my wife, Lauren, started taking advice from her twice-divorced friend Cheryl. It didn't happen all at once. At first, it was small phrases I'd never heard come out of Lauren's mouth before. She started throwing around words like boundaries and emotional labor, as if she'd been waiting her whole life for them. The first time she stopped me mid-sentence with her palm raised like a traffic cop, I thought she was joking. I leaned in to kiss her neck while she was cooking, and she stiffened. "I didn't consent to that," she said. Consent. We'd been married 12 years, and suddenly she was talking like a lawyer cross-examining me. First, I brushed it off. Everyone picks up habits from their friends, right? But this wasn't Lauren's voice. This was Cheryl's voice crawling through her throat. Cheryl, with her 2 failed marriages, her wine-stained laugh, and her habit of holding court at the coffee shop like she's some kind of guru for the brokenhearted. Within weeks, everything I did came under a new system of judgment. If I grabbed us both a coffee on my way home, she'd ask why I hadn't texted first to see if she wanted one. Like a small kindness was an offense if it wasn't pre-approved. If I mentioned stress from a late shipment at work, she'd sigh and tell me I should schedule an emotional check-in before unloading my problems. Lauren wasn't just cold. She was rehearsed, like she was following a script someone had written for her. I'll be honest, I tried. I bit my tongue, adjusted where I could, told myself it was a phase. But men like me, we know when something's more than a phase. A rough patch in a marriage feels like weather. Storm rolls in, you ride it out. What Lauren was doing felt different. It was coordinated. One night, I sat at the dinner table watching her flip through her phone, nodding like a student. She wasn't scrolling. She was reading. Every so often, she'd look at me like I was a problem to be solved, not her husband. And I thought, this isn't a storm. This is a campaign. It got under my skin in ways I didn't want to admit. A man can handle silence, handle distance, even handle a fight. But being managed, that's poison. That's someone trying to turn your life into a flowchart where every move you make is graded, tallied, and filed. The last straw of that first stage came on a Sunday morning. I was making coffee in the kitchen, nothing unusual, when Lauren came in with that clip tone she'd adopted. "David, I don't appreciate you making plans for us without consulting me." I blinked at her. "Plans? You told your brother we'd come to his barbecue next weekend." "That's not a plan," I said. "That's family." Her lips tightened. "You don't get to decide that for both of us." I set down the coffee mug harder than I meant to, and for the first time in weeks I let the anger show. Not shouting, not stomping, just a sharp edge in my voice. "Lauren, since when is seeing my own family a unilateral decision? You've got something to say, say it. But don't stand there acting like you're my supervisor." She froze, like she hadn't expected me to push back. Then she muttered something about boundaries again and walked out. I stood there, gripping the counter, coffee going cold, and realized what was happening. I wasn't dealing with my wife anymore. I was dealing with Cheryl by proxy. And if there's one thing I've learned in business and in life, it's this: when advice comes from the wrong mouth, it poisons the whole well. That was the first red flag, and I wasn't about to ignore it. It was a Saturday, the kind of quiet morning where the house usually smelled like bacon and coffee, and the only argument was over who got the funny pages first. But lately, Lauren had been spending her weekends out with Cheryl. "Coffee date," she'd say, as if the word date didn't already make my jaw clench. That morning, she left in a hurry, laptop open on the kitchen counter, screen still glowing. I wasn't snooping. Hell, I was just moving it so I wouldn't spill grease on it while frying eggs. But then I saw the title of the document staring back at me: Boundary Implementation Strategy. I wish I could say I closed it right there, pretended I never saw it. But I'm not wired that way. You leave a rattlesnake coiled in the corner of your house, You don't walk past it with a smile. You deal with it. So I read. It wasn't some generic self-help fluff. This was tactical. A breakdown of how to apply pressure on your partner until he recognizes patterns of control and adjusts his behavior accordingly. In the margins, I saw Lauren's handwriting. Tried this. He just agreed. Need to be more firm. Another note, resistance minimal, requires escalation. Escalation. I scrolled, stomach tightening with every line. Phase 2 stared back at me in bold, underlined twice. Bullet points underneath it. Limit physical affection. Create a consequence-based communication schedule. Document emotional withdrawal for future reference. And in Lauren's neat script, Cheryl says this stage is crucial. Must not backslide. My hands shook, not with fear but with a clean, sharp anger. I'd seen manuals like this before, only in a different context. Back when I was starting my business, I read books on negotiation that taught you how to corner a deal, how to make the other guy sweat until he signed your terms. This wasn't a marriage document. This was a business playbook dressed up in therapeutic jargon, designed to turn me into a case study. For 12 years, I'd been her husband, her partner, the guy who fixed the leaky faucets, made the late-night pharmacy runs when she had the flu, stayed up assembling IKEA furniture while she laughed at the instructions. Now, apparently, I was her project. I closed the laptop and just stood there in the kitchen, hearing the faint hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock on the wall. Anger pressed against my ribs, begging to spill out. But I didn't slam the laptop shut. Didn't call her phone and demand answers. No, I'd built my business surviving hard men with sharp knives hidden in contracts. The only way you deal with a strategy like this is by pretending you don't know it exists until the right moment. I poured myself coffee, sat at the table, and forced my breathing into rhythm. The smell of toast filled the room. My hands itched to smash something, but I reminded myself, control beats reaction. If Lauren had a playbook, so did I now. And the first rule was simple. Don't let the other side know you've seen their hand. That evening, Lauren came home chipper, carrying that same smug energy Cheryl always radiated. She kissed me on the cheek, perfunctory, like checking a box, and asked if I'd thought about scheduling one of those weekly check-ins. I smiled, sipping my beer. Sure, we can do that. Her eyes flickered with satisfaction. She thought she was tightening the leash, but I wasn't the dog in this fight. As she moved through the house, humming to herself, I thought back to the notes I'd read. Phase 2. Escalation. She thought she was running an experiment on me. All she needed was discipline and follow-through. What she didn't understand, and what Cheryl sure as hell never taught her, was that men like me don't break when the pressure builds. We sharpen. I cleaned up dinner, wiped the counters, kissed her forehead goodnight, all while that phrase rolled through my head like a drumbeat. Boundary implementation strategy. Lauren had declared war. She just didn't know I'd already seen her battle plans. Phase 2 arrived exactly as that damn document had outlined. I didn't need to guess. I could see the gears turning in real time. Lauren wasn't improvising. She was following instructions like a soldier in training. Affection dried up first. A pat on the shoulder instead of a hug. A nod instead of a kiss. She spoke to me like I was a coworker she didn't particularly like, using clipped sentences and managerial tone. Then came the schedules. Little notes pinned to the fridge with times blocked out. Tuesday 8 p.m. Progress check-in. Progress. As if I were a broken employee being dragged into HR. She even had a spreadsheet. I caught a glimpse of it one night on her laptop. Columns with headings like, behavior observed, reaction noted, next step. There was my life reduced to data entry. Most men would have lost it right there. I know guys who would have thrown the laptop across the room, demanded answers, screamed until their throats bled. But that's exactly what the playbook wanted. It needed fuel, reactions, explosions, evidence of aggression. Manipulation can't function in a vacuum. It needs the other side to dance along. So I starved it. When she stopped cooking, I started making my own meals. Simple stuff, eggs, steak, sandwiches, but I ate them with quiet satisfaction. When she drifted through the house like I was invisible, I leaned into it. Came home late from the shop, spent time at the gym, even lingered at the bar with some of the contractors I do business with. I'd walk in, nod politely, head straight to bed without asking for her permission slip of a conversation. A funny thing happens when you stop reacting. The air gets clearer. I found myself sleeping better without the constant tug of war. Woke up early, brewed strong coffee, headed to work in good spirits. Hell, I even started tackling the stack of projects in the garage that had been collecting dust for years. Meanwhile, Lauren kept tightening the screws. More schedules, more silence. She floated around the house, checking boxes off her invisible chart, waiting for me to crack. But the more she pushed, the more I thrived. It was like she'd built a cage and forgotten I already had the key. The tension settled over the house like a cold fog. We barely spoke, except for her scripted questions during those so-called progress meetings. One Thursday night, she sat across the table with a notebook open, pen poised like a therapist. "How do you feel about the changes we've implemented?" she asked, voice clinical. I took a sip of water, leaned back in my chair. "Feel fine." Her eyes narrowed. "Can you elaborate?" "Nope." I watched her jaw tighten as she scribbled something down. That notebook might as well have been a scoreboard, and every time I refused to play, she lost another round. By the end of that week, I noticed something else. She wasn't smiling anymore. Not even that fake Cheryl-inspired smirk. She looked unsettled, because the playbook had promised results, escalation, control, compliance. Instead, she was living with a man who treated her new rules like background noise. One Saturday morning, I came into the kitchen to find her standing there with her arms crossed, glaring at me like I'd stolen something. "What?" I asked. "You don't care, do you?" she snapped. "You don't care about this marriage at all." I tilted my head, studying her. "Funny. That's exactly what I was thinking about you." Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She stormed off, slamming the bedroom door like a teenager. I fried some bacon, poured myself another cup of coffee, and enjoyed the quiet. See, the truth was simple. Manipulation is a two-player game. You can only be controlled if you agree to step on the stage and recite your lines. And I was done performing. Lauren thought silence and distance would break me down. What she didn't realize was that silence and distance were where I thrived. She wanted a Cold War? Fine. But I'd grown up watching real wars on the evening news. Stalemates that lasted decades. Whole empires drained trying to outlast their enemy. If she thought she could wear me down with silence, she'd picked the wrong man. I wasn't going to break. I was going to sharpen. I knew it was only a matter of time before Cheryl stopped hiding in the shadows. Sure enough, one Friday evening, Lauren dropped it casually over dinner like she was announcing a weather update. "Cheryl's coming to dinner tomorrow. I want us all to talk." Her eyes lingered on me, waiting for resistance, waiting for the blow-up that would prove her strategy was working. I smiled and nodded. "Sounds good. Let's invite Mark and Susan too." Her brow furrowed. "Why?" "Because if we're talking about marriage advice, we might as well have friends around. More perspectives, right?" She hesitated, but she couldn't say no without showing her hand. So the trap was set. The next night, Cheryl arrived wearing that smug expression she always carried, like she was the general reviewing her troops. She hugged Lauren with exaggerated warmth, then turned to me with a smile that never touched her eyes. "David," she said sweetly, "how are you holding up?" "Never better," I replied, shaking her hand firmly, long enough to make her flinch. By the time Mark and Susan walked in, bottles of wine in hand, the battlefield was staged. We sat around the table, candles lit, plates steaming. Cheryl wasted no time. "Lauren tells me you've been resistant to some of the new boundaries," she said, spearing a piece of chicken with surgical precision. "That must be hard for both of you." Mark raised an eyebrow. Susan glanced between us. Perfect. I set down my fork, leaned back, and let my voice carry calm authority. "Cheryl, how many times have you been divorced now? Twice, right?" Her face flushed. "That's irrelevant." "On the contrary," I said, smiling slightly. "If a man walked into my shop with a track record of 2 bankrupt businesses, I wouldn't be taking his advice on how to run mine. Mark chuckled into his glass. Susan hid a smirk. I pressed on, not loud, not angry, just steady. See, marriage isn't a classroom experiment or a therapy worksheet. It's two people figuring out life together. But from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been coaching my wife to treat me like a problem to be fixed instead of a partner to be respected. And given your results, 2 failed attempts, you're hardly qualified as an expert. Cheryl's fork clattered against her plate. I was just trying to help her. Help her? Or recruit her? I asked. Because it sure looks like you're running your own little army of the bitter and divorced. The only problem is you're not fighting for her marriage. You're fighting against it. The table went quiet. Mark finally broke the silence with a low whistle. Damn. Susan turned to Cheryl. Maybe you should sit this one out. Lauren's face went pale. She looked at Cheryl like the puppet strings had just become visible in front of everyone. And in that silence, I knew I'd won. Dinner carried on, but Cheryl hardly spoke another word. She left early, muttering something about an early morning yoga class. Our friends stayed behind, helping with dishes, casting sympathetic glances my way. The message was clear. The general had been exposed. When I closed the door after the last guest left, Lauren wouldn't meet my eyes. She disappeared into the bedroom without a word. For the first time in weeks, I felt the atmosphere shift. The playbook had lost one of its key players. And in war, once the general retreats, the soldier is left alone on the battlefield. The thing about exposure is it doesn't end the war, it just makes the other side sloppy. After Cheryl's public humiliation, Lauren moved around the house like someone walking on cracked ice. She still tried the playbook, little digs, the scheduled check-ins. But her confidence was shaken. And when people lose confidence, they make mistakes. Tuesday morning, I found the jackpot. I'd left for work early, only to realize halfway down the street I'd forgotten a set of blueprints. When I came back, the house was quiet. Lauren was in the shower. Her purse sat on the kitchen chair, and next to it was a hardback book with a gaudy cover. Reclaiming Your Power. The 30-day strategy for resetting your marriage. I almost laughed. It looked like the kind of thing you'd find in a bargain bin at an airport. But under the book sat a spiral notebook. Black cover. Her handwriting on the front. Lauren W. I shouldn't have opened it. But then again, a man doesn't walk past a burning fuse and pretend he doesn't see the sparks. I flipped it open. What I saw stopped me cold. Page after page, she had tracked my behavior like a lab rat. Day 12. Emotional withdrawal not effective. Day 18. Start taking photos when he looks angry. Day 22. Progress meeting failed, he stayed calm. She wasn't just following a program. She was documenting her failures and plotting next moves. It read less like a journal and more like evidence building. Halfway through, I hit the line that burned itself into my brain. Goal. Establish consistent pattern of intimidation for future use. Future use. I didn't need a lawyer to tell me what that meant. She wasn't saving our marriage. She was building a case. Every note, every photo, every spreadsheet was ammunition for a divorce that hadn't been filed yet. And guess who was going to be painted as the abuser? The guy who never raised his voice, never lifted a hand, never once gave her cause. Me. I felt that slow, clean anger tighten in my chest. The kind that doesn't boil over, the kind that sharpens a man's vision. For years, I'd heard stories of guys blindsided in court, their wives producing binders of evidence, twisted from normal marital friction. Now I understand how it happens. It wasn't spontaneous. It was engineered. I took out my phone. One by one, I photographed every page. No anger in my hands, no shaking, just steady documentation. When I was done, I slid the notebook back exactly where it had been and walked out of the house with my blueprints. At work that day, I couldn't focus. Orders blurred. Conversations felt distant. Every free moment, I replayed the words in my head. Future use. That wasn't an accident. That was intent. That evening, Lauren acted like nothing had happened. She asked about my day, smiled faintly over dinner, even touched my hand once, like testing the waters. I played along, calm as a preacher at Sunday service. Inside, though, I was locking things into place. Because here's the truth. When someone starts scripting you as the villain, you've only got two choices. You either play the role they've written, or you flip the script on them. Later that night, when she retreated to bed with her book, I sat in the garage staring at the photos on my phone. Each page of that notebook was no longer a weapon against me. It was a shield, proof of manipulation, proof of her intent. If this went to court, she wouldn't be the victim. She'd be the architect. I closed my phone, slid it into my pocket, and smiled for the first time in weeks. For the first time, I wasn't just surviving her tactics. I was armed. The smoking gun was in my hands, and all I had to do now was decide when to pull the trigger. Finding the notebook had been bad enough, but what came next proved just how deep Lauren was willing to sink. Her phone was charging on the counter one evening while she showered. A message preview lit the screen. Divorce recovery support, new message from Cheryl. I tapped the notification, and what opened up made my blood run cold. It wasn't just casual venting with her divorced friends. It was a coordinated workshop, a group chat where women compared notes on how to document abuse, how to provoke reactions, and how to secure favorable settlements. I scrolled through screenshots of articles about legal positioning, checklists of warning signs to manufacture, even tips on how to claim financial control as economic abuse. And there, in Lauren's sent messages, were her own updates. Day 18, tried emotional withdrawal, not effective. Need to escalate. Consider silent treatment combined with accusation of neglect. Worse, I found an unsent draft email to an attorney. Subject line, Walker versus Walker. My name like a case file. Inside, a bullet point list of accusations: verbal intimidation, financial control, emotional neglect. Every single one was a twisted version of her behavior, as if she'd taken a mirror to our life and written me into the ugliest reflection. That was the moment I knew this wasn't a bad marriage anymore. This was war. That evening, she tried to bait me. We were in the living room, TV humming in the background. When she pulled out her phone and set it subtly on the armrest, camera pointed my way. "David," she said, her voice pitched high, like a teacher scolding a child. "We need to talk about your anger." I looked at her, calm, flat. Then I reached into my pocket, pulled out my phone, and opened the photo gallery. The notebook pages, clear as daylight. I flipped the screen toward her. "Funny you mention anger," I said evenly, "because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been documenting me like a science experiment. Day 12, day 18, progress meetings. Ring a bell." Her face was drained of color. She grabbed her phone, fumbling to stop the recording, but I wasn't done. I tapped again, pulled up screenshots of her group chat, the draft email to the lawyer. I read the lines aloud, word for word. Financial abuse, emotional neglect, intimidation. Hell, Lauren, you make me sound like a headline. Problem is, I've got all the receipts that show exactly where those lies came from. She sat frozen, lips parting but no sound coming out. "You thought you could build a case against me," I continued, voice steady as steel. "You thought you could script me into being the villain. But here's the thing, villains don't collect evidence. Villains don't stay calm while their wife tracks them like a suspect. Villains don't catch their accuser rehearsing lies with her divorced friend's fan club." I leaned forward, lowering my voice until it was nearly a growl. "What I have, Lauren, is proof. Proof of manipulation, proof of intent, and proof that you've been preparing to drag me through the mud." Her silence was louder than any scream. Her eyes darted to the notebook on the shelf, back to my phone, then to the floor. She knew. The jig was up. I stood, pocketed my phone, and turned off the TV. "The war just went nuclear," I said quietly, "and you lit the fuse." She didn't follow me when I walked upstairs. For the first time, I think she realized she wasn't the one holding the cards anymore. The morning after I flipped the script, I woke up with one thought: protect yourself before they strike. In business, you never wait for a competitor to launch a smear campaign. You shore up your contracts, secure your assets, and line up allies. Marriage, as it turned out, wasn't much different once it turned into a battlefield. I made 3 calls before breakfast. First, an attorney I knew through a contractor buddy. No frills, no billboards on the highway, just a seasoned man who'd seen every trick in the book. I told him what I had: photos, notes, screenshots. He didn't even blink. "Lock it down," he said. "Document everything. Move finances into your name only, and don't tell her a damn thing." Second, the bank. Joint accounts became individual ones before lunch. I didn't drain them, just rerouted my deposits, set limits, and froze any discretionary spending tied to Lauren's cards. Third, a private investigator. It felt almost paranoid, but I wasn't going to get blindsided. If she wanted to play dirty, I'd make sure I had the high ground. By noon, the first domino had already fallen. Lauren called from some boutique cafe with Cheryl, her voice sharp. "My card got declined. Did you mess with our accounts?" I put the phone on speaker while I kept working on invoices. "Maybe the bank flagged something. Call them and ask." My tone was so even, so unconcerned, that I could practically hear her teeth grinding. That night, they staged their counteroffensive. I walked in to find Lauren and Cheryl perched on the couch like prosecutors waiting for a witness. "We're concerned," Lauren began, eyes flicking to Cheryl for support. "Your controlling behavior with money is a form of financial abuse." I almost laughed. Instead, I pulled my phone from my pocket, tapped a button, and set it recording on the table in plain view. "Funny you should bring that up," I said calmly. I opened my gallery and scrolled to a familiar page. Day 18. Start taking photos when he looks angry. Then another goal. Establish a consistent pattern of intimidation for future use. I read them aloud, word for word. Lauren went rigid. Cheryl's smug face drained of color. "See," I continued, voice steady as bedrock, "I don't need to defend myself. You already documented your plan to invent abuse. Right here in your handwriting." Cheryl shot to her feet, stammering something about me twisting things. I tilted my phone toward her, recording every syllable. "Careful, Cheryl. Wouldn't want anyone to think you're coaching my wife into lying in court." Her skin went pale as paper. She grabbed her purse and fled, muttering excuses. The door slammed behind her. Lauren sat frozen, eyes wet, lip trembling. She opened her mouth, closed it again, then stared at the notebook on the table like it might catch fire. I picked up my phone, stopped the recording, and slipped it back into my pocket. "That's the problem with running a campaign," I said evenly. "Eventually, the truth leaks out, and once it does, your credibility's gone." She whispered, "I didn't mean for it to go this far." I shook my head. "You don't draft fake abuse claims by accident. You don't stage interventions with your twice-divorced friend by accident. You don't build spreadsheets on your husband's behavior by accident." I stood, grabbed my jacket, and headed for the door. "Next time you want to run a war, Lauren, pick an enemy who doesn't know how to fight back." Behind me, the house was silent except for the click of the latch. By the time Cheryl bolted from our house, the war was over in everything but paperwork. The general had retreated, the playbook lay exposed, and Lauren's campaign had collapsed. What remained was silence, thick, suffocating silence that filled every room. For 2 days, she barely spoke. No schedules, no progress meetings, no clipped little lectures. She drifted around the house like a shadow, as if waiting for me to announce the next move. But I wasn't in a hurry. A man doesn't rush victory, he secures it. On the 3rd night, she finally cracked. I came home from work to find her sitting at the kitchen table, head bowed, hands trembling around a mug of untouched tea. "David," she whispered, eyes rimmed red. "I'm sorry." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed. "For what exactly?" Tears welled up. "For all of it." I was scared. I felt small. Cheryl told me that if I didn't take control, I'd disappear. She made me think manipulation was safer than honesty. Her voice broke, and for a split second I almost saw the woman I married. The one who laughed at bad movies, who held my hand in hospital waiting rooms, who believed in me when my business was just a rented storage unit and a beat-up truck. But the image didn't hold, because I'd also seen the notebook, the screenshots, the email draft with my name in the subject line like a criminal case. You think fear excuses betrayal? I asked, voice flat. She shook her head, tears slipping down her cheeks. No, but I don't want to lose you. We can fix this. I walked to the table, set down a manila folder, and slid it across to her. Inside, divorce papers. Clean, fair, everything divided evenly. She blinked, stunned. You already filed? Drafted, I corrected. All it needs is your signature. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. You're ending this? I met her eyes, steady and cold. Lauren, trust broken can't be rebuilt. Not when you've weaponized it. You didn't just hurt me, you tried to destroy me. And that doesn't come back from an apology. She sobbed openly now. Please, I was desperate. I cut her off. You had two choices back then. Tell me the truth or treat me like the enemy. You chose the second. Now you've got two choices again. Sign those papers quietly and we split fair or fight. And I drag every notebook page, every screenshot, every message into the light. Your reputation, Cheryl's credibility, every lie you built. It all burns in public. Your call. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. She looked like a drowning woman searching for a rope. But there wasn't one. Not anymore. I leaned in, lowering my voice until it was iron. You have 24 hours. She gasped. That's not enough time. Then don't waste it crying. I straightened, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and walked out to the back porch. The night air was cool, the cicadas buzzing like a chorus. Behind me, I heard the rustle of paper as she clutched the folder. Out there under the stars, I let the anger drain into something cleaner. Not forgiveness, never that, but clarity. A man doesn't beg for trust once it's been shattered. He draws a line, enforces it, and never looks back. When I came back inside, the kitchen was empty. The folder was still on the table, divorce papers stacked neatly inside. And for the first time in months, the house felt honest. Brutal, maybe, but honestly, she had 24 hours, and I knew she'd take them. Lauren didn't use the full 24 hours. She signed the papers the next evening, her hand trembling so badly the ink dragged across the page. No negotiation, no grand speeches. Just a signature, silent tears, and the faint smell of defeat. I didn't gloat, didn't shout. I simply gathered the documents, slid them into the envelope, and set them aside for the attorney. It was over, not with fireworks, not with courtroom theatrics, but with a single pen stroke that ended 12 years of marriage. 3 months later, she was gone, moved out of state, probably chasing another self-help promise or hiding from the wreckage of her own choices. Cheryl stopped coming around entirely, her name no longer poisoning my house. The silence that once felt suffocating now felt like clean air. I kept my word. I never used the evidence publicly, never torched her reputation with the photos or the notebook. But I kept copies, tucked away in a locked box, just in case. Not out of spite, out of principle. Because the truth matters even when you don't wield it. In the weeks that followed, I learned something most men don't figure out until it's too late. You can't control who betrays you, but you can control how you respond. Lauren's playbook wanted me to be reactive, angry, loud. The caricature of a man she could point to and say, "See? Abuser." Instead, I gave her nothing but calm, steel, and a plan sharper than hers. And that's the lesson. When someone scripts you as the villain, don't step onto their stage. Burn the script. Write your own. I rebuilt my routines. Early mornings at the shop. Barbecues with my brother's family. Long evenings on the back porch with a cold beer and the sound of cicadas. Life didn't feel hollow, it felt mine again. Sometimes people ask if I regret not fighting harder for the marriage. I tell them the truth. You can't fight for something that's already been weaponized against you. Once your home becomes a battlefield, there are no victories left, only survival and escape. Lauren thought she was running a strategy. She thought she was pulling strings. But all she did was teach me one last, valuable lesson. Never let anyone write you into their story as the villain. That choice is mine. and I'll never hand it over again.
Subscribe and stay one step ahead of cheaters. And trust me, the next story makes this one look like a fairy tale.